This is On Target St. John's, a look at politics, crime, education. What's happening here with the people who know. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station. Now, your On Target St. John's host, Linda Swain.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. The Labor Day weekend is behind us and a brand new show being launched this afternoon on Target St. John's. I'm your host for the next hour, and we'll be doing this on a daily basis from here to eternity. Or until Carrie Hodder says I can't do it anymore. She's our producer for today. Thank you, Carrie. And our inaugural guest on the show this afternoon is registered psychologist, Dr. Janine Hubbard.
Hi.
Hi. And of course, this is a busy time of year. I know I'm busy. Any parent out there is busy because we're back to school. And we had a chat about this last week, and there was so much there to mine from that I said, I think I know exactly who my very first guest of this particular show will be, and that's Dr. Janine Hubbard. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stresses and strains and some of the normal stuff and all the things that parents and kids and teens and young adults go through when it's time for back to school. And we're taking calls as well, by the way. I should let people know that this is our very first show, so you may not be used to the format and that sort of thing. Certainly, I'm getting used to the format, so I would invite people, if you have a call, to ask about back to school and certain topics, and we've got a range of topics that we're going to be touching on, Janine, over the next hour to let everybody know what's on the go. And if they want to ask you a question, we'll open up the lines and we'll do so. So, first of all, busy time. Schedules. That's the big thing that we have been trying to drive the little fella in for his normal bedtime, because it's been all over the map over the last 2 months with the sun still shining in the sky and all that good stuff, and getting him in the tub and all that. How do you get kids back into a regular, normal sleep schedule without causing absolute chaos in your household?
Excellent. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to be on the very, very first show. That's really exciting. We'll muddle through this together somehow. First step is we need to get ourselves back on track. It's not just the kids who have let things lapse over the summer. So it's time for everybody to use this as a bit of a time to reboot, to reset, to go, okay, what are the bad habits that I let slide over the summer? Tomorrow morning is a bit of a forced reality check for a lot of people. Today was a forced reality check for a lot of people going back to work. And it's time to get back in terms of sleep schedule. It's time to get back in terms of electronic schedule. It's time to get back in terms of planning and organizing and packing lunches. It's time to think about homework schedules. It's time to get back to all the back to school extracurricular activities. It's a really stressful, hectic period of time. There's no question.
So what are some little coping mechanisms to make all this transition? It's going to be chaotic anyway. Yep. We all know that. But how do you make it a little less so?
On one hand, embrace some of the chaos and know that, listen, life is not going to be perfect for the next week or two, but you're going to get back into the groove of things. Give yourself permission for things not to be picture perfect the way you'd like them for that first day of school. There's going to be chaos. There may be tears. There may be, stains on shirts. It's just life. It's going to happen. As much as you can, get working on the sleep. Again, tonight's going to be hard because you're going to have a lot of kids who are either really excited about going back to school or really scared or really disgruntled about going back to school. So tonight, the emotions are probably going to be fairly heightened. But after you get through that first night, work over the next little while, especially this weekend. Go do some fun things this weekend. Again, we want to make sure that we're not feeling like the end of summer means the end of all fun. Plan some fun things. Plan something fun for tomorrow night after kids have gotten home from school. Plan a fun activity for the weekend. Go and do something summery if the weather permits, or have an indoor campfire and, make some s'mores. Whatever it is that kind of helps to keep capturing summer, but get the bedtime back on schedule even over the weekend. Don't let things slide again just because it's the weekend, because we got a long school year ahead of us.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because it's a little tradition in my house that I've just I don't know, adopted, whereby the first day of school, when he gets out, we go for a little walk, or he gets on his bike or his scooter or whatever, and we just go around the neighborhood if the weather is good. And usually in September we have lovely weather, and just let it all sort of absorb and sink in and just free the mind, so to speak.
Absolutely. And again, even doing that tonight, listen, it's a beautiful day out there today. If you need to help the kids practice, what's the walk to school? Maybe, just use that as an excuse today, or take them for a little drive and follow what the bus route's going to be. Even just that, going to the school parking lot and just kind of seeing, oh, look, there's a lot of cars there. The teachers are back, just to kind of help with that prep of, right, this is what tomorrow's going to look like.
That's all fine and dandy for kids that have already been through the school system, but for kindergarten, what's that like? What how does a parent make that transition easier? Because it's, sometimes kids have been home with their mom and dad, or, for all of these years, and all of a sudden they're off on their own. How do you make that easier for a parent and for a child?
I was going to say, most of the time it's much harder on the parents than it is on the kids. Hopefully, most of the kids have been through the Kinderstart program, which is a fabulous program just in terms of helping kids with the transition, letting them know what their classroom's going to look like, what their teacher's going to look like, where do I go to the bathroom? All those really important things that hopefully they've had that experience. Now it's been a few months, so they've forgotten most of it. But to allow them, yes, absolutely, there's going to be some nerves. So help work with them on what are you excited about? Do you remember when you were there? What PlayStation did you, what play center did you most enjoy working with? Which one of your friends is going to be there? And help really emphasize the positive. And then also emphasize hey, again, you got this. I know you're going to do great. Don't let them know about your fears and worries, because that's just going to magnify theirs. Reassure them that they're going to cope. Yeah, it's okay if they're upset. You know what? If you're upset, go and talk to the teacher, or go and find a toy to play with. Give them some coping skills, and then remind them of what you've got planned for that night when they get home from the first day of school.
And try not to blubber like a baby until you're
in the parking lot or have waved goodbye to the bus, and then give yourself absolute permission to have that in the car or in the driveway blubber. You will not be the only one. It's a big milestone for a lot of kids and a lot of families, and celebrate the fact that, you've raised them well, that they're able to go off and be independent. But boy, are they going to want to give you a big hug at the end of the day.
We spoke about this before, but it's not just kindergarten, it's other transitions as well, because we go through several stages in our school lives. Are the transitions always easy, and are any of them any less stressful than let's say that first day of kindergarten?
Well, for parents, that first day of kindergarten is right up there, probably second with dropping your kid off for post-secondary. But for kids, those transitions between, even if it's from primary to elementary, in some schools that's a big deal. In other schools it's not, just because of kind of the physical layout. But from elementary to junior high is a huge one in terms of the developmental expectations, the organization, it's not just one teacher. We've got all these teachers, and I've got new kids that I haven't grown up with. And then that same thing happens with high school as well. So any of those school transitions, or for kids who've needed to move schools or transfer schools, the fear of being the new kid, and especially in some of our smaller communities, the new kid in a small community where everybody's known each other since kindergarten. Those are some very real fears and concerns.
So how do you allay that?
Biggest thing you can do, and I can't stress this enough, talk to your kid about what has them worried. Don't dismiss the fears, because again, as adults, they can often sound really trivial to us. Find out what they're worried about, and then don't solve it for them. Help them work through problem solving of, if that was to happen, what could you do? How would you solve that? If you were really having trouble, who would you ask for help? Help them generate the steps so that they can feel competent, they can feel independent, they can feel that, you know what? If life throws some stuff at me, I'll be okay. I can figure this out.
Well, let's talk a little bit more after the break about knowing the difference between a child who is feeling anxious and something that might be a little more paralyzing, if we will. We'll come back right after this. You're listening to On Target St. John's.
This is On Target St. John's on VOCM. Now back to Linda Swain, On Target St. John's on VOCM.
And indeed, Linda Swain here on Target St. John's, our special guest for today, Dr. Janine Hubbard, a registered psychologist. We're talking about back to school and all the stresses and strains and wonderful things that happen to parents and children, young adults, teens, at this very interesting time of the year. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about knowing the difference when you're talking to your child, because it's normal for kids to have fears about the unknown and that sort of thing. But how do you tell the difference between a child who's feeling naturally anxious about something and one who is suffering from anxiety, which is a little bit more crippling or intense?
Absolutely. Some of it is you want to take a look at what's happening with their symptoms. Some first day nerves and even first week nerves and jitters and, no, I don't want to go. My belly hurts. My head hurts. Those are really typical, and often they disappear after the first day, but I would hope in kids who perhaps are a little bit more of just nervous temperament, that should settle out within about the first week or so. But if you have kids who are being physically ill in the morning, which happens a lot, or it hasn't resolved within about the first week or two, that's the point where you need to start saying, okay, this is more than just typical back to school jitters. Very often it's a pattern. So certainly, we keep an eye on it in like grade 1, grade 2. Sometimes it was an issue back in, say, kindergarten, and then it doesn't emerge again until later grades. Maybe suddenly it resurfaces in junior high because, again, it's that new period. Or sometimes it's a struggle for kids every year. So some of it's being very proactive. If you have concerns, make sure you're getting in touch with the school personnel early. They provide phenomenal supports. They are so used to dealing with school avoidant kids. They usually set up, a safe space in the office or with the guidance counselor. So somewhere that the kid knows that, okay, even if I arrive and I've just been crying hysterically for the last half hour and I'm not yet ready to get in the classroom, or I'm not presentable looking enough to go into the classroom because I've been crying for half an hour, there's a place that they can kind of recompose. They know it's safe, and then they can get themselves into class. But if the school doesn't know that this is an issue and they're simply, getting absent notes or just, sorry, my kid was late this morning, they're not able to provide that support. So get the school involved from a very early stage.
Some of what may cause some anxiety or anxious moments is, dealings with other students or teachers in the past. There might be a teacher that a child really doesn't click with, or there may be other students that have been causing them problems in the past. How do you know the difference between a normal conflict or teach children conflict resolution and bullying, let's say, for
Really
instance?
great question, because there's a couple issues. The reality is, in life, we all have to deal with challenging people. We are not going to get along with everyone, whether that's in our workplace, whether that's in our social circles. So it's an important lesson early in life to help kids learn, what do you do if there's somebody that, they're really just not your favorite person or your favorite teacher. But rather than get them to avoid the person or escape it, learn how to cope with it. The other discussion that I like having with families very early on is when you're looking at somebody's behavior, is it mean, is it rude, or is it bullying? And really helping to tease out the difference between those three. Because unfortunately, and again, it's great, we've had a lot of programming about bullying, we've had a lot of support, but it means that kids are very quick to label anything that is kind of negative towards them as bullying, and that then almost invalidates the kids who are experiencing the true systemic, ongoing personal harassment or bullying by a particular individual. So again, is it just that, no, the kid was being kind of mean, they were being a bit of a turkey? Were they being rude? Or was it truly something that was targeted specifically at you? And is it something that's been a pattern? For those, you definitely, again, want to be talking to the school personnel.
So for those instances where somebody is being mean or rude, and we can remember these very vividly as adults, well, those moments when somebody said something really cutting or hurtful to you, but that's it and it's over, but it still hurts. How do you talk a child through that?
Well, and some of it is knowing what their relationship is with this other child. Is this a friend who happened to, say something that was uncharacteristic? Is this something that happens frequently with that individual? It may be the teaching your kid how to stand up and say, you know what? what you said to me really hurt my feelings. I think you meant it to be joking, but I want you to know that that's something that actually I didn't like. That little bit of teaching some self-assertion can go a long way. Because again, think about as an adult, how often, again, in workplaces do we need to say to somebody, no, what you said, that really didn't sit well with me. We need to teach those skills at an early age. And again, it's also important for kids to learn what do you do when somebody calls you on your behavior? And hopefully it can be done in a really positive way to move forward. It doesn't always, sometimes it backfires, but we would hope that that's a positive learning interaction that's going to help with future development.
Is it normal to see kids working it out, so to speak, on the field out behind the school, that kind of thing? And is that, healthy in a weird way?
Absolutely. And again, I mean, we obviously want to check out the difference between physical aggression, physical violence versus hey, I didn't like what you did. And, there's a little bit of a tussle. That's how we work things out. Hopefully not, like I say, you want to be very careful about the degree of physicality. But if there's some yelling, if there's some angry words exchanged, and they're able to work through it, and it's a one-time incident or a once or twice kind of thing, again, that's healthy. But if it starts to become physical, that's a very different issue. And that's when you want to step in and intervene with some adult interference.
And that's the job of the schools,
Yep.
Naturally. One of the things that myself and a fellow parent were talking about is this whole notion, because kids are at school all day, they're away from you, especially the younger ones, and you're packing them a lunch and you're thinking about the food groups and you want to make sure that they're getting a fully balanced meal, and they come home and the fruit is always left in the container. It's all beat up and mushed up, and the carrots aren't eaten, and all the stuff that you put in there with great love haven't been touched, whereas the cereal bar is gone. How do you approach children to have a better attitude towards healthy eating and eating those things, even if we're not there saying, eat that?
It's really tricky, and that is something that starts from a very, very young age. The additional challenge a lot of people have is we have kids at a young age who tend to restrict a little bit in terms of the amount of types of foods that they'll eat, plus all of the allergy restrictions that are placed on families bringing school lunches, means for some families, the number of options that are available to them can be really limited. A lot of the schools are great in that they have, a no trading, no sharing lunches policy, which is excellent. I guess I tend to look at it from the big picture of things. So long as your kid over the course of the day or of the week is getting a balanced nutritional diet, if lunch is perhaps slightly skewed towards, more of the carbs and protein and maybe a little less on the fruits and veggies, so long as they're getting them, with their breakfast cereal or in a smoothie or with supper, that they're getting additional servings there. Big picture, picking your battles. It's always worth offering. One of the ways that we introduce foods is simply to include them. Maybe you only include 1 or 2 baby carrots. And if they come home and they're wasted, well, it's not the end of the world. But you keep including them, because there will be that one day that the kid might go, hey, I wonder about this. Or figuring out ways to make them a little bit more kid-friendly. So whether it's including some fruit dip, or whether it's including, some salad dressing to dip the veggies in, all the ways that will help encourage it a little bit. But just think big picture. You have enough battles to be fighting on a daily basis. So long as you, like I say, you're balancing it out throughout the day and the week, your kid will be okay for lunch and snacks.
Linda Swain and On Target St. John's. We have Dr. Janine Hubbard with us. She's a registered psychologist, and we're talking about back to school and all the stresses involved in that. We'll take a short break here now, but when we come back, I want to speak to you about peer pressure.
Okay.
Because that was the big buzzword when I was going to school, and it still exists. And of course, peer pressures today have all kinds of really ominous tones to them with, drugs that are available and those kinds of things.
And
so
they've moved online.
Yes.
So we have lots to talk about when we come back.
Indeed. Let's have a chat about that right after the break.
This is On Target St. John's on VOCM. Now back to Linda Swain, On Target St. John's on VOCM.
Linda Swain, back with you on Target St. John's, and we're here with Dr. Janine Hubbard, a registered psychologist. We're talking about back to school, but we have some breaking news that we want to interrupt the program with. We're going to go to the newsroom with VOCM's Brian Medore. There's a forest fire burning in the hills in the back of the Health Sciences Complex right now in St. John's. St. John's Regional Fire Department is on the scene. Forestry firefighters are being called in. Brian, what more can you tell us about this particular fire?
Yeah, they're waiting for a water bomber because of the high winds out there, around 50, 60 degrees. The gusts are from the south, the winds are. I think it started out as one fire in the hills behind the Health Sciences, or to say to the north of the Health Sciences. Several fires are now burning. Firefighters are very concerned. Those fires seem to be spreading north, which would be toward Pippi Park, toward Mount Sia Road. You have the Rainbow Riders, the horses in the stables, for example. So things like that you can't really do too quickly. You have to make your plans ahead of time. They don't know just where these fires are going to go. You have a lot of properties in that Pippi Park area, Mount Sia Road. So firefighters very concerned about that. St. John's Regional, VOCM's Ben Murphy on the way there. He's at the scene now and trying to gather some information. But this has the potential to be a situation because of the fairly high winds out there, 40, 50, 60 from the south. So, and that's why that fire is spreading north.
And Brian, of course, near the Health Sciences and Janeway, what will that mean for patients there? I suppose they're going to have to turn off the intakes for the ventilation systems.
Very possible. The winds are coming from the south and pushing all of that. It seems to be pushing everything northward right now, away from the Health Sciences Center and more toward Mount Sia Road. We'll have further detail over the next little bit from VOCM's Ben Murphy and the authorities as the situation develops. But it seems to be heading more toward the Mount Sia Road, Pippi Park area, where you have, like I mentioned, Rainbow Riders, a couple of other centers there, and Easter Seals is in that vicinity, Eco Justice System, several buildings that house several different authorities and activities. So we're kind of waiting to see how this unfolds and to see what the water bomber does.
Brian Medore, thank you very much. Keep us up to date.
We have pictures at VOCM.com, and we are on scene.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Brian. And Brian and Ben Murphy will keep us up to date on that situation as the afternoon progresses. Very concerning indeed. And Dr. Janine Hubbard supplied me with the question on the intake at the Health Sciences. That's where you work, so you might have some trouble getting back. But we're here talking about back to school, of course, and we'll come back to the fire as we need to. We were talking before the break about peer pressure. And that's one of the biggest concerns, I would suspect, of most parents. Have you given your child the tools to be able to say, no, man, leave me alone. I don't want to be involved in this kind of thing, whatever it may be. How difficult is that? And what can you say to your child or young person to make them more self-assertive and comfortable in their own skin?
It's such a tricky issue because there are so many layers to it. What do you want to do, I guess, is look for the kids who are going to be more at risk or more susceptible. So oftentimes those are the kids who have social difficulties, who don't have a good, strong peer group, who are really trying to fit in, trying to impress others. So again, they're far more likely to be led to be doing things that might go against their own value system, but because they so desperately want to be accepted, that certainly puts them at high risk. Same thing, kids who are at risk, whether they've got some underlying depression, some underlying anxiety. There is a certain degree of, well, maybe this will make me feel better. So certainly around, we see the non-suicidal self-injury, basically cutting, as being one that can be influenced by peers with it's the, hey, I tried this and it made me feel better. It could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be, any number of substances. The vaping is another one that's a big issue in terms of, again, that peer pressure. The other new element that most of us didn't experience of the parents' generation is the online aspect to all of this. Whether it's the pressure to get engaged in sexting, whether it's the pressure to be sending intimate photographs, whether it's the conversations online that, again, tend to be perceived as being private and anonymous that often aren't. There's a lot of additional pressures going on from a peer pressure perspective that weren't around when we were kids and we were growing up.
So, I mean, how do you say to your teenage child, it's really not cool to take a naked picture of yourself and put it out there without sounding square or out of touch with reality?
Exactly. And it is really tempting. And so it's as opposed to coming at it from a punishment perspective, it's you know what? Sitting down, having a conversation, saying, "Hey, this has been an issue. This is something I heard about on the radio today, or they were talking about this on the radio today. Can we raise this? Is this something that anybody's ever asked you to do? Do you know if any of your friends have ever asked you to do it? How would you feel?" So start those discussions early and also with I won't be upset with you if you come to me and say, "Hey, somebody's asked me to do something I feel uncomfortable about. What should I do?" Or even the worst case scenario, "I've done something that I think I shouldn't have." You want to make sure that you've developed an open parenting relationship so that they can come to you to say, "Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, I screwed up. I need help. I don't know what to do to fix this," without fear that they're going to be, grounded until they're 25. So keeping those boundaries open. It's very much the same way with the conversation of I don't want you getting in a car with somebody who's been intoxicated. No, I don't want you out drinking. But if you are ever in a situation where you feel unsafe, you call me. I will pick you up. There's no questions asked. I will not, you're not going to get in trouble. Your safety is first and foremost. And having those discussions when kids are quite young, sort of the tween age, but particularly, again, as they're approaching the point in time when friends might be driving or have cars, just really emphasizing that there's a safety in our relationship here. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to yell at you about a whole lot of other stuff. But if you call me or if you let me know that you felt in danger and you want my help, it's there without repercussions.
There's an ongoing debate, of course, among parents about when a child should get their first cell phone.
Yep.
When should they get their own social media accounts? When is a healthy time? We didn't have to deal with that. But we have that ability to filter what's nonsense and what's not nonsense, and what we should put out there and what we shouldn't put out there. I would trust that most people know that. But kids don't. Kids are just open and will put it all out there. Yep. What is a good time for a child to, let's say, for instance, have a cell phone? What restrictions should be put on that, or even a social media account?
Excellent questions. And I know the tendency for a lot of parents is to say, "Oh, no, I'm just not going to give my kid access." Listen, social media and cell phone use is a reality of tween and teenage communication. It's the equivalent of us growing up being told, "No, you can't use the house phone." It is a tool that is going to be part of their functioning, so we need to teach them how to use it effectively. So starting fairly early, actually. I mean, a lot of the social media accounts ask for about age 13, but they have started to do things. Facebook, for example, has kind of a kid and family version that has much tighter controls and restrictions on what you can do with it. But it's a way to help teach your kids. Sometimes it's just even I have friends who've their kids have me on their page. And what we had to learn is, no, you can't send Dr. Janine 12 pictures in an hour and wonder why she hasn't responded yet.
There goes the
bomber.
The water bomber, yeah, just went over the building here. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, so it's a question of working with kids. So at the early ages, having open accounts so that they know you are going to be seeing everything they're posting, everything they're texting. That's part of the conditions. But so that you can help work with them. So things like helping to understand, okay, well, when you put something in a text, your friend might not understand that you were being sarcastic or you were joking, or maybe, they didn't understand the tone of voice, but doing it in a way that you can help work with them. Again, also if you're not sure, show it to me before you send it, and I'll help you work through that piece. Same thing. If you come across anything that is making you feel uncomfortable, show it to me. We'll talk about it. You won't get in trouble. That's one of the common issues is kids who are off on YouTube, for example, looking at seemingly harmless videos and now don't get me wrong, sometimes it's through some mischievous searching. Sometimes it's literally through no fault of their own, a video comes up that is not appropriate age content. And there's these worries of, I'm going to get in trouble if I talk about it, but I've just seen something that's really disturbing to me. So again, it's that opening up early on, that open communication and relationship with your kid that says, no, you are not going to get in trouble for this. In fact, I'm going to praise you for bringing it to my attention, letting me know that this was a concern, and let's talk about it.
It's a big debate. Is there an age? Because the brain is developing and you can't put things in a certain context. Is there an appropriate age whereby from a certain age on that you say, yes, give them a cell phone, or yes, open up an account?
Again, certainly at kind of unless there's like an underlying health condition, safety condition. So I have, for example, some of my diabetic patients that I work with may have cell phones from a much younger age for safety reasons, starting with a no data plan. So it's a texting and calling for safety, and you can start to experiment a little bit with the texting from really kind of the tween age. So junior high, definitely. Certainly by high school, you need the data plans and you need the rest of it in place. But kind of that grade 5, grade 6, depending on the maturity of your child, is a really good time to try to start to experiment with it. And same thing around that time, allowing them to start to experiment with some of the social media, but under really strict guidelines and controls, and making sure you're monitoring it closely. So for example, you're monitoring who are they friends with, who are their contacts, and setting up rules like, no, you only set up this with someone in person, have met in person, not your friends, cousins, uncles, brother, whatever, and setting some strict parameters, and spend the time online with them. Which sounds kind of foreign, but if you set that up early on, again, you're setting up that acceptance, but you're teaching them how to make mistakes at a low level. So if you happen to say something rude to one of your friends, you can recover from it then a whole lot easier than you can if you've been launched out into the world in, high school.
Right. And I mean, you think about high school, it's fraught with awkwardness and embarrassing situations and all those kinds of things. We lived through it. There are no photographs to document it. But nowadays there are. And they get out there. You don't necessarily have control over that. You don't know what your friend is clicking off and sending, into internet wasteland. Yeah. So how do you talk your child through something like that, where they've been at a party, they've gotten silly, their friends have taken pictures, and off it goes?
Absolutely. I think the first thing to remember is your kids, this big shocker, are human. They are going to screw up. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to fall down. And it's how we learn from those and how we move forward. So again, it's most of us had to do when social media first started to come up. We needed to kind of say to some of our friends, actually, would you mind taking down that photo? That's not one that I want to have the world seeing. But as grown-ups, that was something we all kind of needed to navigate because we got very excited when it first came along. For these kids, it's just been a way of living and a reality, but talking to them about the concept that things do live online forever and ever, making choices about what they post, but also what they tag, and getting away from the fallacy that Snapchat is instant and goes away. If nothing else, having that very early conversation, but also, again, that self-assertion amongst their friends of either, hey, you know what, I don't want my picture taken right now, or, yeah, I really don't want that up online. You can send it to me privately if you want, but that's not something that I want the world to be able to see.
Indeed, and the whole notion that this could come against you at some point.
Absolutely. Listen, we know that employers, insurance companies, there's a lot of people checking out your online presence. And that's really hard because, as I said, look, in our teenagers, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna make some mistakes. That's just, as we said, we just didn't have cameras capturing it, but we all stumbled. The difference is that close scrutiny that's on people today. So it is having to kind of alter a little bit about the way that you look at things. The other really important, we could have a whole show on this, is talking about the, why do you want to have pictures posted, and the selfies and the, pressure behind some of that. Really sitting down and talking to kids about, well, why is that so important? And yes, absolutely, you looked super cute in that picture, but Why is it important for you to be getting all the likes? And why is it important for you to be wearing that outfit and that kind of makeup? And all of those discussions are just so important. And I guess starting them early, and really and truly, you're starting those discussions in elementary and primary.
Yeah, looking for that validation. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to speak about a new Angus Reid survey out today on what parents think is appropriate time spent on devices. And half of Canadian parents concerned that their child spends too much time on their devices. Not surprising. We'll talk about that right after this.
Now back to Linda Swain on Target St. John's on VOCM.
And Linda Swain here with you on our brand new show on Target St. John's. I want to thank Dr. Janine Hubbard, registered psychologist, for being our first inaugural guest on the show. But we have some breaking news that is unfolding in the capital city region. We're going to go back now to VOCM's Brian Medor in the VOCM newsroom with this update.
Yeah, that fire in back of the Health Sciences Centre. We do have some developments. There are some evacuations now to tell you about. The Elaine Dobbin Centre for Autism, that has been evacuated. No evacuations other than that we know of. We're not sure about the Rainbow Riders. You have to picture that area in between the Health Sciences, and as you go through Pippi Park, and the next roadway you come by northward would be Mount Sia Road. That's where these fires are headed, because southerly winds are pushing the flames and the smoke northward towards Pippi Park. We have the RNC asking people to stay off the trails. Numerous trails in that area. I've walked them many times myself. Many people have. Beautiful trails. Stay off. Everything is kind of unpredictable right now. They've called in a water bomber, but it has to come from Gander. That's going to be about 40 minutes or so. So the St. John's Regional left to their own devices right now. There are several. Started out as one fire in the hills, and several very quickly because of these winds. They're gusting upwards around 60, generally in the 40 to 50 range from the south, as we mentioned. So this has potential to cause all sorts of problems. Rainbow Riders, we believe that they're probably in the process of evacuating the horses in the stable. We don't know for certain at this point. With VOCM's Ben Murphy is there, and VOCM's Fred Hutton will soon be on the scene as well to gather more information. But we're tracking this, and what a development. We didn't expect this today. You know, we have had a pretty good stretch of weather. It's been a very dry August. I think the second driest or the third driest on the Avalon in the recent memory in the last 30, 40 years or so. So that's where it stands right now.
And Brian, looking at some video and images from the area, as you indicated, there appear to be at least 2 fires burning there. Would that potentially have been because of the wind, setting the flankers further afield?
Yeah, you never know, but in these situations where you do have such a strong wind and it is blowing in that direction, say to the towards the more heavily wooded area, had it been blowing the other direction, say towards the Health Sciences, I don't think you would have had that type of spread because the forestation just simply runs out of room. The fire would run out of room there at about Long Pond. But as you head northward towards Mount Si, there's quite a bit of vegetation and forest there for it to feed off, and that probably resulted in it expanding and the number of fires to whatever they are now. Firefighters don't necessarily know exactly how many there are right now, but it has potential for that Mount Sio corridor. Numerous buildings and operations in that area, of course.
And Brian, you mentioned a water bomber is being called in. While I was on the air with Janine Hubbard, you could hear a low-flying aircraft passing over the building. I assumed that was a water bomber. Do we know if they've arrived?
No, that was just a normal chopper. The water bomber has to come all the way from Gander, so that's going to be, well, you've been in Gander many times. You're a base there for a long time, Linda. So as the water bomber flies, that'll be about 40 minutes. So you're looking, that was a few minutes ago. That's going to be around 2:30 before that gets here. So a lot of things can happen between now and that time.
Indeed. Brian, thank you, and keep us updated.
Right, you are.
Okay. And Brian Medor keeping us updated on that fire burning behind the Health Sciences. We only have a few minutes left, but we've got Dr. Janine Hubbard in with us as our special guest on Target St. John's, and we thank you very much for coming in today. We're talking about back to school, and before the break, we were talking about this new Angus Reid survey out today, digital dopamine. Half of Canadian parents concerned their child spends too much time on their devices. That says a lot.
Well, I'm not surprised, actually, other than perhaps surprised that the number is only half. Because certainly, well, it's certainly a concern I hear from a lot of parents. Again, it's that balancing act. As we sort of said, listen, kids do need some of the electronic, whether it's for social communication, whether it's for a little bit of downtime and some gaming, whether it's for some relaxation, whether it's reading, whatever it may be. And don't get me wrong, the devices are wonderful. I've seen them provide a whole lot of outlets and opportunities, particularly, say, for kids who may have some learning disabilities or some different kind of challenges. We know that it has opened up a world of communication and social opportunities that kids haven't had in the past. So I don't want anybody thinking that I'm anti. And again, we can talk about my own screen time use, because I now get the little announcements once a week that inform me exactly how much time I have been spending on each of my devices. So I'm as guilty of it as anybody. And actually that probably raises my first point, modeling behavior for kids. If everyone in the family is sitting down and looking at their phones while you're trying to eat supper, or if you as parents are sitting there doing it, your kids are going to model that. By the time they're ready to have their devices, they've been seeing that that's what mom and dad do. So of course that's what's acceptable. So really trying to model your own behavior, or if there are times when you are needing to spend more time, even explaining to them what's going on and explaining that, you know, it's an exceptional circumstance. I'm working on something for work. I'm expecting an important phone call, something to acknowledge why the rules are being broken, because the rules should be applying to everybody in the house.
Absolutely. Is it best to set those parameters, those little reminders? You know, you have been on your phone now for 2 hours. It's time to give it up and go outside. You know, what do you do?
It really depends on the individual. There are some kids who can accept those limits really well. What I find tends to help isn't so much time-based limits, but activity-based limits. Because again, kids are often playing a level of a game. And if you say you can have 10 more minutes, but in reality, it's going to take them 15 minutes to finish that level, all you're doing by imposing that time limit is creating conflict, you're setting yourself up for failure. It's the equivalent of coming into somebody watching a TV show on broadcast TV. I know nobody does this anymore. And sort of saying, hey, I need you to do this with 5 minutes of the show left. So being respectful and understanding what the activities are that they're doing, or if they're on YouTube, sort of saying one more video, one more short video, but setting some parameters around the activities rather than the limits, the time. So some kids can cope really well with that. Others, we know in particular kids with ADHD, setting it aside, letting it go is a tremendous difficulty. And that has to do with some of the brain wiring as part of their ADHD. So some kids need advance warning. They need the timers. They sometimes need external shutoffs. There are some wonderful pieces of software out there that can act as, if you are a family that needs literally the Wi-Fi to shut off at 9 o'clock at night or at 10 o'clock at night, so everybody in the family is going to bed, or individual devices are shut off, there are programs out there that can help with that piece.
Keep them out of the bedroom?
Absolutely. Recommendations that have come out that no electronics within an hour before bedtime, just because the blue screen light is affecting sleep and affecting melatonin production, which is what helps us gear down to sleep. But absolutely, if you can keep electronics out of the bedroom, listen, and again, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. I use my iPad as a reader. As a reader, it's fine. It has the appropriate kind of light filters. But if I'm reading it 2 a.m, because, I've woken up, it's really tempting to suddenly go and check my email and check my Facebook and check everything else that in the past with just a plain e-reader or a plain book, I wouldn't have done that. So I'm a grown adult who supposedly has reasonable levels of self-control. If I have trouble doing that, how on earth am I going to ask a teenager to do that? The other thing is we know that what tends to disrupt sleep are all the alerts. There's, it's constant things coming through and the temptation to stay up chatting with friends. And the next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. There are also an awful lot of social interactions that happen after hours that you want to be really careful of. So general rule of thumb is central charging stations somewhere else in the house. where everybody docks their devices overnight for charging, and keep them out of the bedroom. Listen, go back to an old-fashioned alarm clock. If they want to listen to music, there are ways that we can do that. Sometimes, although, the high tech is great, occasionally we need to go a little bit low tech for people who are struggling.
Dr. Janine Hubbard, this has been fascinating. We could talk for hours, of course, on this topic. And of course, a lot of parents are fully ensconced in what we're talking about here now. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come in on our inaugural show on Target St. John's. We'll be back in tomorrow with another guest. And no doubt we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me. And best of luck with the show.
Thanks. And Carrie, back to you.